show today, but getting airborne now, off the hard runway, is one of the other Second World War fighters most closely associated with this airfield. Programme, and representing the main Luftwaffe single-seat fighter of the Battle of Britain, the Messerschmitt Bf 109, we have, as so often, two examples of the Spanish licensed Charles take off to this airfield. Thought that perhaps the Bouchon story had come to a close. Not so. A large number of the ex-Spanish Air Force Bouchons were brought. The smoke generator is indicative of the fact that the Bouchon in combat. Quite a lot's been made over the years of Luftwaffe fighter pilots being ordered not to engage yaks in lower level dogfights. I've never been quite sure of the truth behind that account, but what is for sure is that this aircraft excelled at low level, and that was largely where the Soviets used it, rather than as, for example, a bomber painted on one wing of the single-seat Vampire, a black wing band in salute. And here it is. The second was present. Walking towards the American Air Museum, can we see a glass sculpture, a glass wall, entitled Counting the Cost, which has on it the silhouettes of all of the flying fortress in Europe. And Colin, watching it over Duxford, a US Army Air Force's fighter station, of course, allows us to recall the presence of the Americans, not just here, but across the whole of East Anglia with the 8th Air Force.
Yes, the impact of the arrival of the 8th Army Air Force must have been quite something here in East Anglia, which back in the 1940s was a very remote part of England. The only Americans that those people will have seen will probably have been those stars of the silver screen. And some of them, in fact, became... certainly had a dramatic effect on the losses that the 8th Army Air Force and indeed the British RAF suffered. Was really, really dramatic. It's worth remembering, or it's a coincidental thing really, that the first attack was conducted by the 8th Army Air Force from Grafton Underwood up near Kettering, and the leader of that flight was actually Paul Tibbets, a name that would be familiar to you because he went on to pilot the Enola Gay, which at the end of the war dropped the bomb, the atomic bomb, on Japan.
And that first raid to marshalling yards at Rouen in France took place 80 years ago this summer, involving B-17s.
Indeed. And those early raids.
As we were saying earlier, you can sign up today and do your bit to help keep this aircraft flying. The B-17 on its downwind rate there over the tail of the Chilton's site, an evocative sight. Days of coming up against the Germans in May 1940. Same year, gladiators of both number 263 Squadron RAF and the Norwegian military air arm were involved in the efforts to defend Norway against a German invasion. 263 Squadron's aeroplanes had arrived aboard the Royal Navy carrier HMS Glorious in April. After only a few days, they were evacuated because they had so many unserviceabilities among the aeroplanes. They returned in May 1938, or under development soon to enter service. Different manufacturers, different design philosophies, but all fighters that were active at a very difficult time in world history. In they come, the Supermarine Spitfire 1A, leading the Curtiss Hawk 75A1, Grumman Wildcat. '38 was the year when war clouds really began to gather in Europe. Axis forces in Tunisia, and they went on in 1943 to escort bombers, conducting raids on the island of Pantelleria and covering naval convoys in the Mediterranean, as well as assisting the Allied landings on Sicily. They went on to convert to Spitfire 8s and 9s. The 31st Fighter Group moved to Italy and the 52nd to Corsica. They provided coverage of the Allied landings at Salerno and at Anzio, and they carried on operating in close support of Allied ground forces through Italy and southern France. Assigned to the 15th Air Force in April and May 1944, they converted to P-51 Mustangs.
But we fly these delightful 1930s and 40s de Havilland DH-82A Tiger Moths. Now we see some spirited displays today by Spitfires and Hurricanes, Gladiator, Lysander, you name it. No matter what the British and Commonwealth pilots flew, they'd have had to been trained in the first place. And the vast... Here they come through in Vic formation. Vic is the leader of the team, Jeff Lawson, former RAF fighter pilot, flying Phantoms, later a British Airways A320 Airbus. Easy, but in fact it's very hard to hold station in such lightly loaded aircraft. The slightest of uplift or downlift just goes and blows you around like a bunch of crisp packets.